So a lot of it is about empowering the customer to understand what it does and like what the liquid, you know, kind of what its purpose is in a cocktail. And I mean, that's why I love the title of your podcast, because it is, there's a math to it, right? And we, there's your base spirit, and then there's your modifier, and your modifier can be sweet or bitter or sour or all of those things. And then you have your sweet and, your sugar, and then you have your sour if you're making a sour cocktail. So that's one of the things that we're starting to kind of work into our education, but it is kind of that second tier, if you will, of education.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Decoding Cocktails podcast. I'm your host, Chris LeBeau. At the ripe age of 38, I left my former career behind and joined the hospitality industry. Since then, I've been on a rapid journey of learning, meeting all sorts of great people, and this podcast is my chance to bring you along with me, whether I'm interviewing somebody that works in the industry, another enthusiast, or occasionally stepping back to share what I'm working on or my thoughts. I'm so glad you're here, and so with that aside, let's get into today's episode. What's happening, friends and cocktail neighbors? Welcome back for another episode of the Decoding Cocktails podcast. I am your incredibly charming host, Chris LeBeau. Today, we have a fun look inside one of the alcohol retail giants, Total Wine & More. Here is a short excerpt from a Forbes article titled, How Total Wine Became the Largest U.S. Wine Retailer. Robert Trone and his brother, David, grew up working on a farm in Pennsylvania tending 50,000 chickens and 600 pigs. Their parents also owned a small gas station that sold beer. When the farm went bankrupt, all they were left with was the gas station. From that one small gas station, the brothers grew the business into a national empire. Today, they have 263 superstores and have recently become the largest alcohol retailer in the U.S., with revenues of $6 billion in 2023, surpassing Costco and Safeway. To hear about the fast-growing spirits and mixology side of the house, my guest today is Molly Horn. She is the cocktail strategy manager and spirits educator for the company. She is also a certified sommelier. With a history in hospitality and cocktails, she joined the company during the pandemic as their spirit sales began to explode and customers' interest followed suit in cocktails. For a general indicator, during our conversation, Molly shared that pre-pandemic, spirits accounted for about 27% of total sales. Today, in some stores, it is 50%, which is a massive shift. During this conversation, we had a chance to talk about the NA movement, what she focuses on teaching her team, how she thinks about the influence of things like additive-free certifications on tequila bottles, the fact that in states where it is allowed, Total Wine allows you to taste a high number of products before buying them, which I honestly didn't know. She'll also tell us about two of her guilty pleasures. One is quite luxurious, and the other one, not so much. Finally, since I feel like this cannot be said enough, and Molly will repeat it in the conversation, according to their in-house data, roughly 80% of people buying NA products also consume alcohol. So when we talk about the growth of this category, we are not necessarily talking about people who do and do not drink alcohol, but people who drink both. As the NA movement continues to grow, I think over time this is simply going to be seen as another thing that you can drink. Molly is not on social media, but I am going to include a link to what's called Molly's Picks, which is a page on Total Wine's website. She is a delight. Enjoy this conversation. So Molly, at this point in time, at least for those of us who live in a market where Total Wine exists, it almost begins to feel like this kind of ever-present, I've almost heard like bigger companies referred to this way as like is a utility, just a thing you kind of expect. So how did the conversation for you and Total Wine begin? Like, how did you find yourself at this juncture? I know you're a hospitality, veteran, so to speak, but how did you actually find yourself in this role?
So that's a great question. And it's funny because I grew up in Bethesda, which is actually like my childhood home is minutes from our corporate office. But we don't have many stores in Montgomery County because it's a closed county. It's kind of like Oregon or whatever. So you know, hadn't been to a Total Wine before, but I worked with a large restaurant group in the DMV called Founding Farmers or Farmers Restaurant Group for a long time. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth and really learned like the history of cocktailing in America and across the world, and really fell in love with the craft. DC was a little later on the scene, like things that were happening in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and even like Chicago and maybe Philly took a little longer to reach DC. So that restaurant group was really one of the first to start putting pre-prohibition era cocktails on the menu and making drinks very consciously and, you know, from a craft perspective. And so I learned a lot there. And then I opened a restaurant with one of my best friends in Silver Spring in Montgomery County after years being with that restaurant group. And that was a really great opportunity to create my own bar program. And I was there for a while. And one of my regulars was at the time the vice president of spirits at Total Wine. And I didn't even understand really what his role was. He'd sit at the bar. I talked to him and his wife. His name is Eli. He's great. And I was studying for the SOM exam. I was going through the court at the time. So I talked to him about the wines that I was trying to taste, and he would help me kind of like pick out which, you know, oh, here's a Sancerre. That is a perfect example of a Sancerre. If you're going to blind taste that against New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and a California Sauvignon Blanc, that kind of thing. And then when COVID hit, of course, the restaurant, you know, we had to lay kind of everybody off, and it was bare bones management, just doing takeout. And he reached out to me and said, how would you like to have an office job? At the time, I had recently gotten engaged and was getting into my 30s and thinking about starting a family, which is definitely difficult to do in the hospitality industry. So my husband and I have been talking about options. And so this really came along, not to say that COVID was good, but this came along out of COVID and was like perfect timing and a really great opportunity. And Total Wine had never had anybody in a mixologist role before, because again, our spirit sales were so much lower leading up to 2020. It was maybe like 28% spirits and the rest was wine. And then of course, you know, when on-premise kind of closed down and people couldn't have that connection, a lot of bartenders started going on Instagram and doing Instagram Live and showing people how to make their favorite cocktails at home. And there was all of this movement of people getting to really get more in touch with the kind of drink making process. So they were starting to buy a lot more spirits, and even outside of just kind of those base spirits of vodka, tequila, whiskey, it was cordials and amari and aperitifs, and you know that whole, all of the modifiers, if you will. So it was a really great opportunity, and I've been able to kind of shape it as I've been at the company for a while. So it's been quite a ride.
You know, as somebody who is this is a COVID related created business itself right here for me. And yeah, so I think it's cool. One, like, you know, recent podcast guests, they were on the cocktail scene in Charleston, and they're like, hey, we're thinking about starting a family. How do we, you know, kind of have something that's not as quite the late punishing hours and whatnot.
Right.
And so yeah, the different ways. Now, obviously we are still, in the earlier part of your tenure with the company at this point, but to the 27% figure that you kind of mentioned at that point, are there any numbers you're aware of in terms of what spirit sales are today? And again, you could have some fluctuation of like surges during COVID or whatever,
right.
But are we seeing a steady increase, or what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because this is really the first year where in some of our largest markets, where we have the most stores and, you know, like high density stores around large cities and so forth, we're seeing some of those stores are even seeing more than 50% spirit sales to wine sales, which is, yeah, pretty crazy. And really helps me with job security. So that's great. Thank you, everybody. But yeah, and it's, we're getting a lot more customers who are coming in with those questions of, how do I make this? I'm looking for this because I saw this online, or my favorite restaurant makes this and I want to be able to make it at home. And people are getting so much more comfortable with that. But it's still a new language to them, and a new world, if you will, to explore. So that's one of the reasons I love my job, is I get to help train our team members to set them up for success so that they can answer those questions and help people kind of find what they're looking for. As a bartender who had never been to a Total Wine because I didn't grow up near an actual store, I didn't fully realize the extent of what we had in stores. I thought it was more like the big names and kind of, a lot of large format bottles and then a ton of wine. And the first time I went in, which was immediately after I was hired, Mike Lowry, who's our current vice president of spirit sourcing, was like, hey, we're going to go to our largest store and you're going to sell. And I was like, okay. But it was awesome because I got to be in the store. Our huge store, it's like this, almost the size of a city block, is in Delaware, so tax-free, Claymont, Delaware. And I was just, every single person I was talking to them about, like, oh, sure, like you need Chinar, or like, yeah, you're going to need, Nonino for your paper plane. And let me help you find the right orange liqueur for the style of margarita that you're looking for. So that was like a really good immersive experience. And it just alerted me to like how vast our portfolio is.
And I wonder in a way, and I imagine Total Wine wouldn't mind carrying this banner, but like being a bigger player, that does have more of like a mainstream look and feel and appeal. Like you guys in a way maybe almost are a little bit more of a national barometer for things. And like that is cool in terms of just hearing what that change has been for your sales is really kind of this interesting indication where I think there's still this huge swath of the population that it's easy to forget about, that has no clue and maybe is never even interested, but like can be introduced to their first proper daiquiri or whatever for the first time, or has no idea what Amaro is. But we are seeing this massive growth curve of people seeking out all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just fascinating because yeah, like to the on-premise world, I think as well, like one of the big conversations is just we've all taken maybe our food seriously for a while, or the wine program. But
Right.
as you've lived, it's like, oh yeah, sure, we can throw together an old fashioned, even though we don't know what it is. And over time, whether it's retailers or restaurants, are really beginning to think more about properly making these things, the ingredients, the technique, etc.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just talking to a friend about how I'm a diehard fan of Top Chef. I've been watching it since the beginning. A lot of us in restaurants, I think, really relate to the show. Anyway, but I think it's interesting that there has not been the same celebrity mixologist movement outside of the industry. So within the industry, there's those of us who are like, oh, like Sasha Petrovsky and Dale DeGroff and Jeffrey Morgenthaler now. And, you have all of these people who are really incredible mixologists who have changed the scene, and revolutionized our culture, and driven this, to your point, like technique-based, attention to detail. This spirit goes well if you're doing this type of old-fashioned, that use this bourbon, but if you're going for this direction, use this, high rye bourbon. That level of focus, and those of us who are in the world and immersed in the culture, there's definitely like a starry-eyed, experience if you get to meet one of those people. But you don't see it with the everyday cocktail drinker the way you do with restaurant goers who are like, oh my God, like, I went to that Kristen Kish's restaurant in Austin and it was amazing and I got to meet her. And so I'm surprised, because I feel like at this point, with cocktails being such a huge part of the modern restaurant goers lexicon, that we haven't seen quite as much of fandom around mixologists.
Yeah, and I
Maybe
guess
it's
what
still to come. I'd like to believe so.
yeah, and whether or not like Drink Masters on Netflix is kind of the beginning of that. But yeah, I think much like food being on TV, cocktails being on TV, so to speak, hopefully
Hmm.
is one of those things that does begin to push that more into the quote unquote mainstream. So I guess I'm curious, like, as you said, like Total Wine has obviously had a beautiful skew of products for a long time, but now we're really beginning to move it. And, I mean, the number of things, like the depth of the shelf is just keeps getting bigger. But so I
Right.
guess I'm curious, like, as you see people beginning to, we always need to remember what the basic questions are that we need to answer for guests. But as you see the American palate expanding in this area, are there right now the priority questions or things that you're beginning to train your staff more on that they need to be prepared for? Are there, and it's going to vary probably by geography, but are there the questions or things you're trying to begin to make sure your team is comfortable assisting with these days?
So that's a great question. That's one of my favorite parts of the job. And it's also one of the hardest because I'm based here at the corporate office. I do get to go into the market occasionally, but not as often as I'd like to, because of course I'd love to be just in our stores face to face with our customers all the time. But I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is starting with the fundamentals. A lot of our team members come in and they either have not really experienced that much in the world of alcohol yet. They're like kind of freshly out of college and they're still training their palates. Maybe, the most advanced drinks they've had is like a pitcher of Bacardi and Sprite at their local college bar. And then we have kind of on the opposite end of that, we have like these awesome, super passionate retirees who just love spirits and wine. And they're like, I love this world and I want to still be in it. And I like working. I don't want to sit at home and be bored. So they come and, join our staff, which is amazing. But in order for things to be able to stick and people to be able to really process information, they have to have that foundational understanding of really how to drink these spirits and what they are. So we kind of start with the base spirits, if you will, right? Like the 7 major categories of vodka, American whiskey, whiskeys of the world, tequila, brandy / cognac, rum, gin. So we kind of have that foundational training, and we have been for the last couple of years, kind of since I joined, introducing mixology into that, and how, for example, looking at the world of vodka for a long time, especially because the TTB definition of vodka was basically like odorless, neutral, taste, whatever. And it has now since been amended because they recognize that the base material impacts the actual mouthfeel and to a degree, a nuance of flavor. So in that Vodka 101 training, we talk about corn-based vodka. It has a touch of citrusiness. It's a tiny bit on the almost sweeter side on the finish and really light and crisp. So that's excellent in simple highballs, Moscow mules, maybe a Cosmo, maybe a, I don't know, gimlet. And then we talk about winter wheat-based vodka and how that has a lot more of a silkiness on the palate, and it's a lot rounder and has that kind of cereal grain note. So that's really nice in a martini. And so that's kind of where we start in the training, and we go through building that very basic level of knowledge. And then kind of the next step, if you will, that we are introducing, and we have different training opportunities throughout the year, is kind of what questions you can ask somebody without having to know a lot about cocktails, because we don't want our team members to feel overwhelmed like they have to memorize the Death and Co lexicon of recipes. Like there's a lot of recipes out there. So it's more simple cocktail math, if you will. Let's look at a sour ratio. Let's look at the construction of an old fashioned versus a Manhattan and a spirit forward cocktail. And then when somebody comes in and they're asking for help for finding the right ingredients, what do you like about that cocktail? What flavors are you looking for? What else can I help you find? So we can make the base spirit recommendation. Oh, I love a margarita because it's refreshing and crisp. Okay, let's get you a nice light, maybe a Highland tequila that has some little sweet vanilla notes. Or, oh, I love the flavor of agave that I get in a margarita. Okay, so let's go lowlands. Let's get you a little bit more of that like earthy vegetal agave flavor. So I think, and it's so much fun because we do have such a large assortment. There's so many directions to go, but of course that can also make it overwhelming for the team member. So there's it's a delicate line to walk. And I do think it's all about tasting. We're always having them taste, and now we're starting to do, or really for the last year, have been starting to make batch cocktails in our stores in the states where we can to offer to our customers as tastings and including them in our customer classes. So there's a lot of opportunities where we can cross train both our team members with our customers, if that makes sense, which is kind of a win-win.
It totally does, and yeah, I would agree. It's amazing how often the basics are just. It's so important to understand those first. Yeah, and for as hot as tequila is, it's cool to kind of have those questions. Speaking of that, and there's so many directions we can go. Of course, I'm curious because I have an anecdote from a local retailer here in Missouri, but I noticed on your guys' site that you are quick to kind of highlight like, hey, like this is one of the additive-free tequilas. It's been kind of the bigger
Uh-huh.
conversation. How are you guys finding? Has that begun to impact what is moving on your end, or how are you finding that these days, in terms of being able to like, or is that just inspiring the conversation of what these things are?
So it's interesting because I think there is there's a challenge in that world because there's the customers who are super knowledgeable and they come in and they want to have a conversation, and that's super exciting because our team members love to have that conversation as well. And we do have some great options. Kind of it does vary market by market, but
Sure.
certainly in California and Texas there's a ton of options. And then we have other, maybe not quite as large of a portfolio because production can be so limited on those additive tequilas. But I think the challenge comes from kind of that world of influencers where you see a quick 30-second clip and you're smitten, but maybe there's not a ton of depth of knowledge around what that means. Because my concern grows from, there are amazing craft tequila producers who are still using Tajonas to mash the roasted agave coas, but they are not necessarily certified additive free because there's always been that 2% rule that you know is is there for a reason, because there's maybe a touch of this that you want to just help lift up all of the other flavors. And it doesn't mean that it's not a craft family made tequila. So I just don't, my concern is just that we're going to lose the trees through the forest, if you will, by like having blinders on only these ones are the best. They're excellent. They're fantastic. They're also different. You get different notes in an additive free tequila than you do in, traditional tequila that isn't going through that certification process. So I guess my point is just neither one is better. They're both excellent. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, obviously we want to call it out for people who are excited about it and are looking for it. And it makes it, again, a little easier for our team members because there's so much on those tequila shelves. So when somebody comes in asking for it, great, we got you. Here's some tags. We can help you find that. But just not losing sight of the other family made craft tequilas that are also really great. And so there's always a little bit of nuance there when there's a trend. Not that I also don't think that this is a come and go trend. I think this is something, it goes hand in hand with kind of the younger drinker who's very conscious of what they're drinking and making, when they do drink, because they're drinking less, it's a very thoughtful choice, which I completely respect. And I think it's exciting for the industry because again, it's letting us put craft on a pedestal, and that's really important for people who are putting their passion behind what they're making.
I agree that I think to assign value solely based on an additive-free certification or not does become a little too black and white. I think it's useful for us to know when and why things are being used, but
Right.
because I think it's also like you could be an additive-free tequila producer and like treat your employees like crap and or whatever, right? So it's like just because you're making
Right.
additive-free spirit does not mean therefore wholly you are now a good person. So I think it's like for
Right.
us to not reduce it down solely to that. But I know And some people, to your point, may be driving it with more fervor or dogma, but like there's a retailer here in Missouri, and they have kind of really gotten behind the additive-free certification, and they have seen sales just like take up and tank at the same time. And so I think it's just interesting in terms of I think what's important is I do think some level of transparency, but
Right.
giving the customer the information and just ensuring that like, oh, what do you mean there's glycerin in here? So I think for
Right.
them to know these things and then you can do what you want with that. Because for some people, they just know they like brand X and
Right.
that's what's important to them. And so I think as long as we are still a country of choice, then let them do what they want with that information. There are people out there who know that X in another category is bad for them or has all sorts of preservatives and they still like that. And that's
Right.
we let them do that there, so why not here?
Right. No, I think that's a very good point. And I think that's one of the reasons that our team member education is so important, so that they do have like the answers as to why. And yes, absolutely, let me show you. And again, also having a lot of options on the shelf. We can help the customer who is interested in that, or we can help the customer who's maybe just super focused on price point. They're having a big party and they're like, I'm going to make a giant batch of margaritas, and I'm not trying to spend $80 on a tequila. I just want something that's going to make this margarita taste great and won't break the bank. Great, we've got something for you. Oh, you want something that's really giftable and comes in a beautiful package. We've got something for you. So I think that's one of the benefits of us having, such a large retail like space, because that's kind of part of our business model, right? Is always having those big, maybe not the size of a city block, but big storefronts, so that we can really expand our tequila set. And I will say, I mean, over the last 3 years, we've been doing, we call them, it's not renovations. I can't remember what the term we use is. But basically like a store reset where we change the design slightly overnight, so that there's longer aisles for tequila and American whiskey, and maybe we're cutting down on another category in order to have more of that, because we know that's where people want to have more options.
So I would imagine in Bethesda, part of the conversation, one of the things I'd sent over to you as well is, and it's cool that you guys can again kind of have the categories of like, oh, this is something that's very giftable, or this is something that's very
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, how do you think about as the tequila shelf or whiskey shelf continues to get bigger? How do we avoid customers just being wholly overwhelmed, or,
Right,
and maybe then when they are overwhelmed, then they'll go for the dependable brand that they've always liked. But,
right,
but,
right.
but, but how do you guys manage that level of skew right there?
So it's definitely a challenge. And I mean, I think if you were to walk in and you didn't know what you were coming in for, you were like, oh, look, there's a Target, right? There's Total Wine. Let me just, I'm in the neighborhood. Let me stop by. It can definitely, I think that is probably one of the situations where you'd be most overwhelmed, because you walk in and it's like, oh my God, this place is huge. Where do I begin? So, I mean, we have a few really great tools at our disposal, and it does vary slightly market to market, but in a majority of our stores, we can offer tastings. And I think that's huge. That makes such a big difference, because giving people the opportunity to taste something, and if you have a question and you're torn between two options, there's a pretty high chance that we can actually open one of those bottles to give you a taste. So that, I think that's really cool. Like, it's not even just what's at the tasting table, because we have that little kind of area in each of our stores where there's the tasting table, and there's always somebody pouring something there. But there's also that opportunity for kind of in aisle tastings that is just really special, and I think sets us apart. And then, really the other part of it is our team member education and that training. And constantly, I mean, we have weekly education programs, monthly education programs, quarterly annual education programs. They all involve tasting products. We do blind tastings with them. We do kind of vertical tastings, if you will. We'll look at various different mash bills within the same category. So maybe we're like, let's taste a wheated bourbon mash bill, high rye bourbon mash bill, kind of traditional Kentucky straight, maybe 21% rye and other grains mash bill. So, and then they have that language and they're much more comfortable talking about the world of bourbon and asking that customer like, oh, what do you like about, if you're looking to expand, you're looking to try something new, what do you like about your whiskey of choice? Excellent. Here it is. And let me recommend, if you haven't tried this before, this other bottle, maybe you walk out with two, maybe you just stick with the new recommendation because you got to taste it in the store and you loved it. And maybe that time you're just sticking with the one you had, but you feel more confident. You can explain what you love about it. And at the very least, the next time you come into our store, or even you go to a bar or restaurant and you're talking to the bartender, you get to try something new there because you have a little bit more language as far as why you love what you love. So I think that's a really big part of how to help people feel less overwhelmed, because I think that sense of overwhelmingness a lot of times comes from a bit of like uncomfortableness of like, I don't know why I love this. I don't know exactly what it is that keeps bringing me back to this. So why would I change?
And I think that sometimes brand is also that level of security of like, this equals quality or certainty for me. And so I think for
Right,
some people who are like a hard, like Casamigos margarita, on the double, or just like
right,
they're worried about like looking weird or again, or they want to be perceived a certain way, but they know this works and they're worried about the downside of that. I wonder how much, with your role, I always say like I think that the real priority of like of bottle sales is like if you sell someone a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of Campari or whatever, great, good for you. The real question is, did you sell them a second one? Because the number of times that I'm in someone's home and there it is, like the prized bottle that they have barely used,
right,
obviously we're at a point where as the quality of spirits continues to tick up, people are certainly sampling them and enjoying them on their own. But I wonder, yeah, kind of how does the team think about and how do you approach this of like, if we want to sell them another bottle, because
right,
like because well, they're at the candy store when they're visiting you guys, so to speak, the
right,
adult, and so they get excited because they see a bottle of chartreuse and they've heard so much about it, but then they get
right,
home and they drink it on its own. And they're like, "Whoa, this is so like I don't know. I guess this is too macro of a question, maybe, but like, yeah." The power of the education is also, are they going to use it or are they just going to be happy they
right.
bought it and then never get around to it?
So it's interesting because, and even just on the front of brand, like you look at the wine side. If somebody comes in for Camus because they know they love Camus and like their friends know what Camus is and everybody loves Camus, great. That's not sitting in your wine cabinet for years and years. Even though it is like a higher end bottle that has a bigger price tag on it, you're opening that for dinner, with your friends that Friday night, maybe even Thursday. Um, so and I think part of that is because you will drink that in 4 days. Like it's not you're every single sip of that wine isn't like, okay, let me sip this, let me savor this, let me really process what is going on. You open it, you have those first, you nose it, you have those first few sips, you luxuriate in it, and then you drink it with your meal. And then the bottle's gone, right? With spirits, it doesn't go away that fast. I mean, even if you're making cocktails with it every single night or you're drinking it neat every single night, it lasts a while because you're not drinking, 6 or 7 ounce glasses.
Right.
You're drinking maybe a 1.5 or 2 ounce pour. And those bottles are the same size. So I think that's one of the challenges that does lead people to be more brand centric because they know that it's going to sit there for a while. So there's the
Mm.
combination of that, like, oh, I've been looking for it for a while and I was finally able, like chartreuse is a perfect example, finally able to get hands on it because of course now, on premise or off premise availability is so cut down because those monks and their commitment to
Cra-
praying.
Crazy monks, yeah.
Yeah, geez, how dare they? Um, So, when it comes in, you're like, oh, let me get to the store, let me get the bottle. And then let me use it super sparingly, or to your point, like it's super intense and I only know this one recipe. So I think that's a really great point. And one of the things that we are working on, that, maybe I'm super comfortable with, and some of it, every now and then we'll have a team member who was a bartender for a while and they do want a regular 9 to 5, or, weekday regular hours, not having to be there until 2 a.m. job. So they'll join a Total Wine store as an hourly team member. And of course, for them, they can have that lexicon of recipes in their mind as well. But of course, it's hard for the average team member to be like, okay, so here's a bottle of Campari. Here are 7 different recipes you can make with it. We can't expect them to know that, because
Right.
that's a whole different level of. So a lot of it is about empowering the customer to understand what it does, and like what the liquid, kind of what its purpose is in a cocktail. And I mean, that's why I love the title of your podcast, because there's a math to it, right? And there's your base spirit, and then there's your modifier, and your modifier can be sweet or bitter or sour, or all of those things. And then you have your sweet and, your sugar, and then you have your sour if you're making a sour cocktail. So that's one of the things that we're starting to kind of work into our education, but it is kind of that second tier, if you will, of education. And we're starting to work it into our classes. So actually we have a consumer class, I should say, coming up in September, end of September, called Stocking Your Home Bar. And in the class, they taste base spirits and some cocktails. But we talk about, I worked into the class kind of the roles of of ingredients in a cocktail. And again, what is Campari? Okay, so it's bitter. It's also a touch sweet. It can do X, Y, and Z in a cocktail, and then kind of empower the customer to feel like they can kind of play a little bit and experiment on their own, now that they have more, what's the word, like context for
Yeah.
the spirit.
Yeah. And I think like, the food world, people can get, it's like, oh, like bacon on its own is great. But at times, like the BLT works because it's so refreshing, right? Or like,
Right.
and see, I think for someone to understand, or like when I tell them like, there are times it's almost like, and I remember stealing this from Toby Maloney's Bartender Manifesto book, but him just saying that like, it's that the style of the spirit is way less important. I'm like, I want people to know, not that it doesn't matter, but it's like when you're looking at a style of drink, it's like what placeholders are being checked off. To your point, I see my modifier, I see a spirit, I see some bitters. Oh, this is a martini style cocktail right here. Like what role is that? It's like Campari can be used for seasoning, or it can be used in a much more dominant Negroni style cocktail. And
Right.
when people understand like what is this for, then you
Right.
can begin to understand how to apply it more liberally. And I would agree that that is a very complex educational session, and requires
Right.
certainly that your team needs to kind of be tiptoed into the water, because otherwise you can't teach them that first. Otherwise, yeah. Anyways, it has to be stood on
Right.
top of it, especially when you're trying to educate at scale like you guys are.
Right. And we talk about that in the world of education, of like kind of webs of knowledge. So if you've never, if you're, again, like you're fresh out of college, you've only had a Long Island iced tea or whatever, and somebody's talking to you about like a potable bitter versus, a traditional
Yep.
Angostura or Peychaud style bitter, that there's nothing for that information to attach to. So we could talk about it till we're blue in the face, but you're not going to be able to process and digest it. So you need that kind of, that again, that foundation, and then kind of you can build off of that, and then things start to connect. And that's also why it's so important to taste both the ingredients on their own, for our team members, especially in our stores, taste these things on their own, and then taste them in cocktails, so that you can see how all of those flavors come together. I mean, a Negroni is such a fun one to deconstruct. You taste gin on its own, you taste sweet vermouth on its own, you taste Campari on its own, and then you taste it all together. And like, if that's the first time you're experiencing that, you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
how did all of those things come into balance?
Yeah. So when we talk about kind of this arc of 27% of sales to 50%, uh, when consumers come in at different price points and different level of caring, as the world, there will be more than one answer to this question if there are
Mhm.
answers. But as the world kind of comes more into mixology, when people are like, hey, like looking at a team member, like, here's where I am. What do I do next? Are there ways when like you're talking about a sour or an old fashioned or whatever way you want to run with this? Where do you suggest people begin to like to level up? I mean, like, okay,
Uh,
like clearly we need to maybe get off the proverbial bottom shelf of like buying a decent quality spirit. But what are the things when people are looking at your team eagerly for suggestions? Where do you suggest they begin to invest more money or
uh-huh.
time in kind of leveling up the quality of their cocktails?
So it's hard because I think, and like you're right, there are probably multiple answers to this, and I'm sure, um, one of our spirits managers in one of our stores would probably have a different answer for me. Um, I think it partially begins with the individual customer, because there's a different, if you come in and you're just getting into the world of it and you love margaritas, then like the first thing we're going to do is get you, personally, I would go with a mid-range tequila and an excellent orange liqueur. And I think that's you know what I mean? Because that's where there's going to really be like a good tequila is a good tequila in a margarita. You don't need an $80 tequila or, Don Julio 1942 to make your tequilas. I don't think we need to go that far in that direction to level up your tequila. But a really great orange liqueur also doesn't break the bank. We're talking in the 20s and 30s. And when you have that like real curacao orange flavor and it's got those notes of bitterness and the kind of like tart fruity rind flavor, that's gonna elevate all of the fruit notes in the tequila. It's gonna elevate the vegetal notes in the tequila and in the agave nectar. It's gonna like that the fresh lime juice is gonna help that shine as well and elevate those notes. So I think for me, where I get to have a lot of the fun, and this is where we're starting to invest more time in education, is in that world of cordials, aperitifs, amari, liqueurs, and so forth, because I think that that's kind of where it begins. I mean, on the other hand, if you're talking about an old fashioned, of course we're gonna look at the bourbon set, because outside of that, it's just your bitters and then the other
It's so
things are what you have at
minimalist.
home.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, and I would agree that I think whether it's the margarita or the martini, it's like,
Mhm.
I feel like, again, the things that you guys do every day, it's like people don't know what vermouth is. And so it's like so
Right.
they've got their choice gin, but the vermouth is kind of like they're buying something more economical. And like much
Right.
like with your orange liqueur, it's like rather than over investing, or supercharging one category, how about we just make sure
Right.
that we've raised the caliber of the whole drink first before we worry about, because the booze gets all the it gets all the brand appeal, like look at this. And
Right.
yes, so I think an understanding, like it's fun too, something you deal with all the time as well. It's like when I explain to people that like Cointreau, for the example, is a triple sec, they just go, "Oh, I thought triple sec just meant crap." And it's
Right.
like, yeah,
Totally.
yeah. So it's interesting as you kind of work with people on that knowledge of realizing that, like, oh, here's a triple sec done poorly, and here's what it means when it's made with integrity over here.
Right.
So
Here's a
yeah,
top shelf one. Right. No, totally. And that's a perfect example, because that's one of the areas where I think there's the customer, especially who's new to making cocktails at home, there isn't a lot of understanding of like the orange liqueur category is one of my favorites to train in. It's also like my guilty pleasure. Like I will sip. I mean, I have like 5 different cognac based orange liqueurs at home, and I'll like rotate depending on if I want something like deeper and earthier versus something that's like brighter and more, vanilla-y. But that's like my after dinner drink. And anyway, so I'm very passionate about the category. And I think that, like, to your point, oh well, this is a top shelf triple sec. And this is, your $8.99 triple sec. And Absolutely. If you're like just going for a big batch and you're like, I'm just throwing a party and I'm not super worried. I just want it to taste good and whatever, then great. Here's your 1.75.
Sure.
But if you're just making a few drinks and you're uh, really wanting to have like kind of a story to tell through the liquid, step up in that category and it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. And yeah, when you're at your favorite bar and people are like, why does this taste so good? And it's like, well,
Right.
I wonder, and there's a level of technique. Clearly, that's very important. We don't need to worry about technique today, maybe. But yeah, I think it's like, oh, like you're trying to do the same thing with different ingredients.
Right.
Um, so knowing that, obviously, you guys are a business and always looking to kind of yeah, or looking to grow, whether that's within the existing footprint or expand into new markets. How are you guys riding this? To something you said earlier, how are you guys riding this NA wave at this point in time? How are you guys kind of and I know that beer is the predominant thing, and I always love
Right.
kind of saying to people that, a huge portion of people that drink NA products drink alcohol. This is not an
Yeah.
abstinence only play. And when you don't want to drink alcohol anymore, don't, great. But yeah, but I think like the NA cocktail, the NA beer, it's so awesome now. When you
Hmm.
make one properly, it's like, oh, do I really need the booze? Anyway, so how are you guys leaning into this right now? And where do you see that market as from your high level lens right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so first of all, one of the things you mentioned, we recently did some got some statistics on the sales trends, and I think it was something around 80 or 82% of people who buy NA buy alcohol, like at our stores. I mean, this is just based on our stores alone.
Wow.
So it just not that we, no matter what, should ever disregard that customer, because that's a very valuable customer either way. And I have family who's sober, and I was pregnant a year ago, which, by the way, it's a great time to be pregnant, especially if you like beer like I do. I spent the same amount of money as I always do while I was pregnant because I was drinking a lot of non-alcoholic beer. But it's a customer who, again, like we're talking about, they're thoughtful. Maybe they're taking a break. Maybe they're during the week drinks is NA. Maybe when they like to host, they like to have options. So it's a huge range of a customer who is purchasing NA. And really over the last year, I would say, is when we've started to give more shelf space to that category. And I sit in on the tastings that we do with the buyers for that team, because a lot of it is mixology driven. I mean, the one thing about a majority of the spirits, especially the base spirits in the non-alcoholic category, is you're not really drinking them neat. Like, I can drink an excellent gin neat. I mean, maybe I'm an old British woman, I don't know, but like there is you can kind of drink any spirit, in the traditional category, neat. Maybe not, most vodkas, because vodka. But you're drinking that on the rocks.
Right.
But you can have it without mixers. And I think in the NA world, you are mixing those. So when we're tasting them, when we get samples, I like to be there, because you have to kind of be thinking about, like, how will this show? How will this present when it's in, its final form of some form of cocktail? So anyway, and I think one of the biggest challenges in that category is the customer frustration and confusion about why it's oftentimes more expensive. And it's tough, because we get why it has to be. They have to use, alcohol is a flavor conduit. So when you don't have alcohol in it, you have to use like 10 times the amount of herbs or spices or whatever they're using to add flavor. Or if you're dealcoholizing, if you make something and then you dealcoholize it, of course, that's also a expensive process.
Sure.
So it's tough, because there's definitely a little bit of pushback on the price point. But there's some really, really good stuff out there. And I think giving it, again, training our team members on it, having them taste it in finished drinks. We actually did a consumer class last January on mocktails, where we had them taste 8, mocktails using different, various combination of any spirits and syrups and juices and non-alcoholic sparkling wines and all that kind of stuff. So did that answer your question?
It did. It did. No, I think it's like no. It's cool that you guys are giving more space to it. It doesn't surprise me at all. Molly, I don't know if you remember this from that tasting or just from any of your, because I feel like you're right, because the NA market does require a level of construction. I guess
Mhm.
I'm just curious, and I don't need you to make this any more about brands, than you want to, but I feel like that's part of the problem is people are excited about it, but then they get home and like it is more difficult to balance. And again, you're not just drinking these on your own. So are there NA avenues you suggest people start with? Because obviously some of the NA products, the texture isn't quite as weighty. So
Right.
so so are there any like general starting tips you're trying to begin to impart to ensure that people get home and they find success with these NA bottles?
Well, so I always recommend starting with gin. I think the NA gins are kind of, they show the best. And a lot of that is because it is kind of like herbaceous water, if you will. And that's what regular gin is, just, with a little bit of heat and, a slightly different mouthfeel. So I think there's some really, really great NA gins out there. I mean, really, that's the one area. The only reason we're not bringing more in is that we already have too many.
Sure.
So otherwise, we'd probably bring them all in because that really, I have found that that's the one that is the most successfully executed, and they have different styles. Maybe there's one that's a little bit more kind of junipery, but also earthy and on like the savory spice side. And then you have the more like light and floral side. So they have different functions that mix great with different tonics. But again, that's an easy avenue to start on because you have a very tangible connection to it. You get a good tonic and you get an NA gin and you know what a regular gin and tonic tastes like. So you're able to relate to it and it evokes that kind of sense memory and flavor profile. I also think like spritzes, there's some really great NA aperitifs. Yeah.
Great. Yep.
And great non-alcoholic sparkling wines. I mean, that's again a similar category. Non-alcoholic sparkling wines is very successful. Like a majority of the ones that I've tasted have been very delicious and really evoke the flavor of a sparkling wine and experience. So, an NA spritz is an excellent avenue to go down. And then I think, if you're going to do something on the more like stirred cocktail front, I think that's when my recommendation is just not to shy away from sugar and sweetness
Yep.
because you need to replace that mouthfeel, like you were saying, that silky texture. So if you're doing like an NA old fashioned, for example, and there are some great non-alcoholic bitters, if people are going like 100% dry, obviously bitters you're not using a lot, so some people are like, I'll just use the regular Angostura. But use it like normally if I made an old fashioned, I'd muddle a sugar cube with a couple dashes of bitters and whatever. But if I'm doing a non-alcoholic one, I might use something like the Bar Smith old fashioned syrup because it's adding that viscosity.
Yep.
And so that's how, you're going to get a little closer in approximation to it.
Yep. No, I think I found I was using Seedlip's new agave product, and it's interesting, I mean, but I found that I did a faux egg white in there, and that really helped
Okay.
like bring it more together. And so yeah, I think like egg white-esque,
That's a
more
great,
or more
yeah,
sugar to your point, like something like again, even when I use like tea, but I find if I put some kind of like um egg white product in like in a black tea sour or whatever, it's awesome.
right.
But it does need a little bit more of that body right there. Really does help, I find.
Have
So
you heard of the sushi rice trick?
you know what? I have, and I haven't actually thought to do that in the I've
I'm
done
just
that
thinking about it now as we're talking.
I've done it with espresso coffee beans. I did the espresso bean thing and I did the rice thing side by side.
Okay.
And I did find they both certainly lengthened the flavor. I didn't think about it for the NA products. So
I'm just thinking about it now, but yeah, I feel like maybe we'll have to start selling sushi rice in that
that,
shelf
that'd
space.
be great. Guys, we're getting into the food product space. But yeah, I think that's
Right.
yeah, or you guys might have some of the NA foamers too. But anyways, that's really cool to think about for the sushi rice piece. Okay. Huh. I love it. I love it. And I love the NAG&T as well. Obviously, you're going to get some of that body from the tonic water as well.
Right, right.
Are there, as we kind of bring things maybe a little bit to a close here, I mean, are there things that are on your horizon of planning or that are have your interest these days that we haven't discussed? Or I know one of the other questions I sent was like sleeper products you wish people would buy more, knowing that they vary.
Uh,
But anything that you want to discuss as we kind of bring things to a close
I know,
here?
sad, so sad. I mean, it's funny because every time we talk about like, oh, what's next, or like what do you there's a level of like what do you think will trend next is kind of tied to what do you hope will trend next, because we don't nobody knows for sure. And then once you say it, maybe it happens. And I think in the bar beverage world, a lot of us have been saying rum for a long time. I've been saying rum for a while. We all love rum. And I think we actually, this year is the first year we've done a consumer class that's 100% rum. And we started with Bacardi, because that is the foundation of a white rum that actually, goes through kind of a Cristalino process before Cristalino tequila was really a thing, because
Sure.
it is aged and then filtered. But then we went through the regions and we talked about terroir of sugarcane, and also kind of the particular, maybe like cultural, like rum production nuances. Like you look at Jamaica and the Dunder Pits, or you look at, on the other hand, you look at Guatemala and things are, there's a lot more high elevation. So the aging is going to be different. And that was it was an overwhelming class for me to put together because it's such a huge world, but it was also really exciting, and talking about like why, you know, classic tiki drinks will call for a Jamaican rum and Demerara rum and overproof rum or whatever, like all in one cocktail, and showcasing how much nuance there is across that category. And it's such an approachable price point because most of it is a byproduct, right?
Yeah,
So,
it has not popped as a category either, too. Like, yeah.
and
So
tiki did. I mean,
sure.
I feel like there was a huge tiki movement, and it's kind of calmed down, and we still have really incredible places. I mean, you've got Smuggler's Cove and Three Dots and a Dash, and all of these amazing, I mean, there's hundreds of places I'm not naming, but I feel like the proliferation of new openings has calmed down from like 10 years ago. But the ones that exist are still like revered in our community. And a lot of that is because of that, like, fresh ingredients, everything's made from scratch, and so forth, that kind of came before the early 2000s craft cocktail movement. But yeah, I just think, I think and hope that is still to come as a trend, and a category that I really want and hope customers explore, because there's so much to have fun with and to fall in love with, that will break the bank. And you're not kind of chasing things, in the world of whiskey.
Right.
It's like, when is this going to hit the shelves? And like BTAC, and amazing, great, fantastic, absolutely, I love them too. BATC, no, BTAC. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think and I hope that there is growth on that side. We've definitely seen gin grow, and I think that has a lot to do with like the young drinker. There's a lot of exploration in the gin category, and it's very inspiring for cocktails because there's so much flavor nuance in it, and a lot of those flavors are things that you find, maybe in the plant world, if you will.
Yep.
So you can like elevate it with, a little sprinkle of fresh rosemary or basil, or depending on the gin. So I think that is also, an area where I love to see some people experimenting. We have one called Gin Arte that is a really beautiful package, but it's a little lighter on the juniper and has these really beautiful kind of lavender floral notes. And that was like one of the first products I was introduced to when I first joined the company. And I was like, this is so cool. Like because that's one of the ones that, like, it's a yellow tag item. It's one that you mostly can only find at Total Wine. I think it's from Italy, I want to say. But it's, I think that's one of those ones where when I first came into Total Wine and I first started trying things that, I hadn't come across in restaurants, I was like, oh, wow, there's a whole world of products out here that I've never experienced and come across. And I just want to play in it.
I did a, tasting last week with a Citadel gin, and they brought in like 6 or 7 of their products, and yeah, the spectrum of flavor on those was just mind-boggling. So yeah, and yet a rum. I love like the idea of like bringing a traditional white rum, a Jamaican, and like an agricole like side by side, and being like, by the
Right.
way, these don't taste anything alike, and yet they are all rum. And like it's just
Right.
it is so it's sugarcane is near and dear to my heart as a category. And I think it's just trying to explain to people, because your point, it's so mind-boggling. Like with the least amount of difficulty, I could put 4 rums on this table and have them taste nothing alike.
Right.
Whiskeys are often going to be at least directionally similar,
Totally.
but with the rums, it's wild. It is crazy. And which makes it so hard for people to try to get their head around what in the hell
Right.
is this? So yeah,
And it's
it's
kind of like you were talking about with that overwhelmedness experience when there's so much on the shelf. Like there is a lot of rum, that's being produced that's excellent. But if you don't know like what, how to drink it or really like what to do with it and how it's made, what it's made from, why an aged rum might evoke some similar flavors to, a bourbon or an aged tequila. I think that, it's like, what, I don't have context or familiarity with that category. So I'm going to stick to kind of what I know within this huge other assortment of the area that I know I like. So I think that's where that comes in. But hopefully, as more and more people get to taste things and attend our consumer classes,
right.
we'll get to push that trend.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, people across what is it? I pulled the numbers this morning. 270 stores in 28 states. So there's probably a Total Wine near you. Um, and yeah, 8,000 wines, 3,000 spirits. We like seeing that number. So yeah, like I mean, obviously they could probably find you guys, but if they want to keep up with you and your journey, are you anywhere living on online these days, or have you escaped
I
the internet portal?
I am under so I mean most all of the cocktail videos and all of the kind of Total Wine, branded work that I do is through our Total Wine Instagram profile
Perfect.
at Total Wine. I do have my own profile, but it's mostly just pictures of my baby, so it's not very exciting. I mean, she's
Fair
very
enough.
cute. Don't get me wrong. And yeah, I've been I judge at the San Francisco Spirits competition. And every year when I go and I see kind of all my colleagues, and you have like the Julie Reiners and Helen Diaz's and all of these people who are very kind of respected within the industry. And they all have these very curated, beautiful Instagram profiles. And I'm like, okay, I need to get on that. And
You
but
don't,
yeah,
you,
so I'm
and you
working
don't
on it.
have to, and you don't have to. I mean, it's its own double-edged sword wormhole where I don't keep the Instagram app on my phone anymore because I just
Uh-huh.
and yeah, like to me, it's just I don't know. Anyways, I want people to be able to keep up with you in the journey, but they can do that on the Total Wine page right there.
Yes, absolutely. And I also have an expert picks page on our website. So
Okay,
if you're like, and in my reviews and like explanations of the items, I talk about how I love to use it, what I love about it, kind of what the flavor profile is, how I first came across it that made me fall in love with it. And like, there are some of my guilty pleasures on there, such as peanut butter flavored whiskey, which I have to admit, I kind of love, like,
yeah,
sorry, it's delicious.
you know what? And sometimes that's it. Yeah, and I was gonna say, uh, yeah, for a rum pick at Spirits Direct, at least only in Missouri, Dorley's from
Yeah,
Foursquare
Dorley's great.
from Foursquare is a, and again, you look at that price and then go look at your favorite economical whiskey and you're like, whoa, this is
Yeah, an 8-year bourbon is going to be
way less. Yes.
right.
So, yeah, Dorley's is a great pick that you can, at least here in the state of Missouri, you can only get at Total Wine as far as I know.
Yeah,
So,
if you like the team behind Plantation, aka Plantaray, now
yep, yep.
Maison Ferrand also does Caniche for Total Wine, which is a
Okay.
really great line. The XO is excellent, and I love making when I have people over, I'll usually make tiki cocktails if I'm not just pouring wine and I am making the extra effort and somebody's watching the baby, so I can focus on, infusing falernum for 5 days beforehand and making my own passion fruit syrup and whatever. But that's like, I lean on that one pretty heavily because it really spans, it has a lot of layers of flavor in it. So really great for tropical cocktails.
Perfect. Yeah, I think I remember you doing it with a fish house punch, maybe was in
Yeah.
your recipe. Yeah. So okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, thank you. So this has been an absolute delight. Thanks for taking the time to chat today. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you. This was so much fun. I wish we could do this forever.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you'd write us a review on whatever platform you listen on, or share an episode with a friend. The show notes are available at decodingcocktails.com/podcast. Happy cocktailing, everybody.